There are names that, when spoken, resonate with a singular clarity across generations and continents. They require no further explanation, no contextualizing phrases, for their essence is already understood. Such a name is Elvis Presley. It drifts through the air, carrying with it a faint echo of melody, a distant memory of movement, a subtle shift in the cultural landscape. Before the elaborate costumes, before the iconic gyrations, before the sold-out stadiums and the blinding lights, there was simply a life unfolding, a life that, from its quietest beginnings, was destined to become something far grander than anyone could have possibly foreseen. His image, his voice, his very being etched themselves into the collective consciousness, becoming a touchstone for an era, and indeed for many eras that followed. We perceive him now, often as a fully formed phenomenon, a force of nature that simply appeared. Yet, like all significant figures, his journey was a progression, a series of moments, both ordinary and extraordinary, that collectively forged the legend. This narrative will trace that path from its most unassuming origins through the triumphs and complexities, observing the unfolding of a presence that continues to endure. We will move through time, gently, examining the threads that wove together to create the intricate tapestry of his existence, understanding how one individual came to occupy such a vast space in the human story. The story of Elvis Presley truly begins in a small, unassuming house in Tupelo, Mississippi. It was here, in the depths of the Great Depression, that Vernon and Gladys Presley navigated the harsh realities of their time. Their world was one of persistent struggle, where each day presented its own set of challenges, often centered around the most basic necessities of life. Tupelo in the 1930s was a town deeply affected by the economic downturn that gripped the nation. Opportunities were scarce, and the pursuit of a stable livelihood was a constant endeavour for many families. Vernon, a man of quiet disposition, worked various jobs, often manual labour, to provide for his young family. Gladys, his devoted wife, faced the daily pressures with a resilient spirit, her focus always on the well-being of her home. Their dwelling, a modest two-room shotgun house, was built by Vernon himself with the assistance of his brother and father. It stood as a testament to their perseverance, a small shelter against the vastness of their economic hardship. Within these humble walls a profound bond of affection and mutual reliance blossomed. The scarcity of material possessions served perhaps to strengthen the emotional ties that bound them. This environment of pervasive poverty, coupled with the deep devotion shared between Vernon and Gladys, formed the crucible of Elvis's earliest experiences. He would be born into this world of limited means, where the simple act of survival was often a daily triumph. The experiences of his parents, their quiet determination, and the palpable love within their small family unit would indelibly mark the formative years of a boy who would one day transcend these very origins. The quiet rhythms of Tupelo and the steadfast presence of his mother and father would be the initial anchors of his existence. On January 8th, 1935, in that small Tupelo home, Gladys Presley entered labour. The circumstances of birth in rural Mississippi during the Depression were often challenging, marked by limited medical resources and the inherent risks of the time. What transpired that day would cast a long-enduring shadow over the Presley household and profoundly shape the life of their only surviving child. Gladys first delivered a son, Jesse Garon Presley, who was stillborn. A short time later, his identical twin, Elvis Aaron Presley, arrived, alive and seemingly healthy. The joy of Elvis's birth was thus immediately intertwined with the profound sorrow of losing Jesse. This simultaneous experience of life and death, of arrival and departure, created a unique emotional landscape for the family. For Gladys, the loss of Jesse was a grief that never truly receded. it became a permanent fixture in her emotional life, an ever-present reminder of what might have been. She often spoke of Jesse as if he were still a tangible presence, and Elvis grew up keenly aware of his twin brother's absence. This unspoken, yet deeply felt dynamic infused their relationship with a particular intensity. Gladys's protective instincts toward Elvis were amplified by this early tragedy. She doted on him with an almost singular focus, perhaps seeing in him a vessel for the love and hope she had held for both her sons. For Elvis, growing up with the ghost of a twin brother meant that he was, in a sense, living for two. This awareness, however subtle, contributed to a deep-seated sense of being special, yet also perhaps a quiet understanding of solitude. The shadow of Jesse Garon remained a constant, or unspoken element in the fabric of their family life, shaping the boy who would one day become a legend. Growing up in Tupelo, Mississippi, Elvis Presley's early soundscape was rich and varied, a tapestry woven from the distinct threads of his environment. The most immediate and profound musical influence came from the church. The Presley family were devout members of the First Assembly of God Church, a Pentecostal congregation where music was not merely an accompaniment to worship, but an integral, often ecstatic expression of faith. Within the humble walls of the Assembly of God, young Elvis was immersed in the vibrant tradition of Southern gospel music. The singing was fervent, often featuring powerful, unadorned vocals, close harmonies, and a call-and-response structure that encouraged participation. The rhythms were driving, and the melodies soulful and the emotional delivery deeply expressive. This was music designed to stir the spirit, to evoke passion and devotion. Elvis absorbed these sounds, the cadences, the vocal inflections, and the raw emotional power of gospel from a very young age. It became a foundational element of his musical sensibility, a direct pipeline to the heart of American spiritual music. Beyond the church, the airwaves offered another, equally potent source of musical education. The radio, a ubiquitous presence in many American homes by the mid-20th century, brought a diverse array of sounds directly into the Presley household. In the racially segregated South, radio waves nevertheless transcended social barriers, carrying a rich blend of genres across the region. Elvis would tune into stations that broadcast the blues, a genre born from the experiences of African Americans, characterized by its deep emotion, distinctive guitar work, and often mournful yet resilient narratives. He also listened to country music, then often referred to as hillbilly music, with its storytelling lyrics, fiddle tunes, and heartfelt ballads that spoke to the lives of working-class Southerners. Rhythm and blues, or R&B, with its energetic beats and expressive vocals, also found its way into his ears. These diverse styles, emanating from different cultural wellsprings, coalesced in Elvis's receptive mind. He did not hear them as separate, distinct categories, but rather as a broad spectrum of American vernacular music, each contributing to a nascent understanding of rhythm, melody, and vocal expression that would later define his own revolutionary sound. The church and the radio thus provided the essential building blocks for the musical language he would eventually speak. The year was 1946, and a significant milestone approached for young Elvis. His 11th birthday was on the horizon, and like many children, he had a particular gift in mind. His mother, Gladys, had intended to buy him a bicycle, a common desire for boys his age. However, Elvis had expressed an interest in something different, something that perhaps resonated more deeply with the sounds that had already begun to shape his inner world. He wanted a rifle, a seemingly ordinary request for a boy growing up in the rural South, but one that his parents, particularly his mother, gently discouraged. Instead of a rifle, a compromise was reached, one that would prove to be profoundly consequential for the trajectory of his life. For his birthday, Elvis received his first guitar. It was a modest instrument, purchased for a little over $12 from Tupelo Hardware, a small investment that would yield unimaginable returns. The guitar was not a toy, it was an invitation, a tangible link to the music he had so intently absorbed from the church and the radio. With this new acquisition, Elvis began a quiet, self-directed journey into musical exploration. There was no formal instruction, no rigorous lessons from a seasoned teacher. His approach was intuitive, guided by his ear and an innate feeling for rhythm and melody. He would spend hours with the instrument, strumming the strings, attempting to mimic the chords and vocal styles he had heard. His early attempts were, as might be expected, rudimentary. He was a boy learning by doing, fumbling through chords, his fingers slowly acclimating to the fretboard. He would often sit on the porch of the family home, or in the privacy of his room, singing along to the tunes he was trying to play. This period of solitary practice was crucial. It allowed him to experiment freely, to connect his voice with the nascent sounds he was producing on the guitar. He learned the basic chords, enough to accompany himself, enough to begin to translate the music in his head into something audible. Even at this early stage, a natural inclination towards music was evident, a quiet persistence in the face of initial awkwardness, signalling the stirrings of a profound talent. The year 1948 marked a significant turning point in the life of the Presley family. Economic hardship, a persistent companion in Tupelo, ultimately necessitated a move. Vernon Presley, seeking better employment opportunities, decided to relocate his small family to Memphis, Tennessee. This was not a move driven by ambition or a grand plan for their son's future, but rather by the simple, pressing need for stability and work. They packed their meagre belongings and journeyed the roughly 100 miles north, leaving behind the familiar landscapes of rural Mississippi for the bustling urban environment of Memphis. Memphis, even in the late 1940s, was a city of distinct character. It sat at a crossroads, both geographically and culturally. The Mississippi River flowed past its western edge, a constant artery of commerce and movement. The city was a hub for various industries, and its population was a rich tapestry of different backgrounds and traditions. For Elvis, then a 13-year-old boy, and this move was an immersion into a new world, far removed from the quiet familiarity of Tupelo. Crucially, Memphis was a vibrant cultural melting pot, a place where diverse musical forms converged and intermingled. While Tupelo had offered glimpses of various genres through the radio, Memphis presented them in a much more immediate and tangible way. At the heart of this cultural confluence was Beale Street. This historic thoroughfare was renowned as a center of African American commerce and entertainment, particularly for its blues clubs and juke joints. Though Elvis was still a young teenager, and likely did not frequent these establishments directly, the sounds of Beale Street permeated the city's air. The raw emotive power of the blues, the rhythmic drive of rhythm and blues, and the storytelling tradition of country music were all palpable presences in Memphis. He would have heard these sounds on local radio stations, in record shops, and simply echoing through the streets. This rich auditory environment further broadened his already diverse musical horizons, deepening his appreciation for the distinct elements that would eventually fuse within his own unique style. The move to Memphis was not just a change of address, it was an expansion of his world, an unwitting preparation for the musical revolution to come. Upon arriving in Memphis, Elvis Presley enrolled at L.C. Humes High School, an institution that would witness the quiet development of his early personality and burgeoning interests. His early years at Humes were marked by a discernible shyness. He was not an outgoing student, often keeping to himself, a contrast to the dynamic performer he would later become. Teachers remembered him as polite and generally well-behaved, but not someone who sought the spotlight in academic or social settings. He often carried his guitar to school, sometimes playing during lunch breaks, primarily for his own enjoyment or for a small circle of friends. Despite his natural reserve, a growing fascination with personal style began to emerge during these formative years. Elvis developed a distinctive way of dressing, often choosing clothing that stood out from the conventional attire of his peers. He favoured bright colours, unusual combinations, and fabrics that caught the eye. This nascent interest in fashion was not merely a superficial pursuit, it was an early expression of his individuality, a quiet rebellion against the conformity of the time. His hair, too, became a canvas for his evolving self-image, meticulously styled and often distinctive. This attention to his appearance was a precursor to the iconic visual identity he would cultivate. Amidst this period of personal exploration and quiet self-definition, the first stirrings of his public performance abilities began to manifest. Though still shy, he started to participate in school events, typically talent shows or assemblies. These were not grand concerts, but rather modest opportunities to share his music with a familiar audience. His performances at Hume's High School were tentative steps onto a stage, offering early glimpses of a nascent stage presence. He would sing and play his guitar, often choosing popular country songs of the day. These early appearances, and though small in scale, provided him with invaluable experience. They allowed him to test his voice, to feel the rhythm of a live audience, and to begin to understand the connection between performer and listener. The reactions from his classmates and teachers, often positive and encouraging, would have provided a quiet affirmation of his musical path. These high school years, therefore, were a crucial period of incubation, where a shy young man quietly cultivated his unique style and took the very first hesitant steps towards a destiny that would eventually captivate the world. After graduating from Hume's High School in 1953, Elvis Presley entered a new phase of his young life, one characterized by the practical demands of adulthood and the persistent pull of his musical inclinations. The family's financial situation remained challenging, and there was an immediate need for him to contribute to the household income. This period saw Elvis take on a series of jobs, each a step in the rhythm of daily life for countless young men in Memphis during that era. One of his most notable and enduring occupations was as a truck driver for Crown Electric Company. This role involved delivering supplies and equipment, a task that took him across the city, allowing him to observe the varied landscapes and communities of Memphis. The work was steady, providing a regular paycheck, which was a primary concern. He operated a Ford F-100 truck, navigating the city streets, fulfilling his duties with a quiet diligence. This job represented a tangible effort to support his parents, a responsibility he felt deeply. The desire to earn money was not merely for personal gain, but for the stability and well-being of the entire Presley family. Despite the demands of his working hours, Elvis never abandoned his musical aspirations. Music remained a central, if often private, focus of his life. His guitar was never far from reach, and any spare moment was often dedicated to practicing, writing, or simply losing himself in the melodies that filled his mind. He would often sing to himself while driving the truck, the cab becoming a temporary intimate performance space. These were not public displays, but rather a continuous, quiet pursuit of his craft, honing his voice and refining his guitar skills away from the gaze of others. He would frequent local music stores, listening to new records, absorbing different styles, and sometimes engaging in conversations about music. The dream of a career in music, though still distant and perhaps somewhat abstract, continued to simmer beneath the surface of his everyday working life. The truck-driving job, while mundane in its daily routine, provided the financial foundation that allowed him to continue nurturing this deeply personal ambition. It was a period of quiet dedication, where the responsibilities of a working man coexisted with the persistent, growing call of his artistic destiny. In the vibrant, often segregated musical landscape of Memphis during the early 1950s, a small recording studio began to cultivate a distinctive sound that would eventually reshape popular music. This was Sun Records, established by Sam Phillips. Phillips was a visionary, a man with a profound ear for music and a deep understanding of the raw, unpolished energy that pulsed through the city's blues clubs and juke joints. His studio, located at 706 Union Avenue, was modest in appearance, but it quickly became a crucible for a new kind of sound. Sam Phillips harboured a particular philosophy, a deeply held conviction that there was an untapped wellspring of musical talent, particularly within the African American community, that deserved a wider audience. He recorded many black rhythm and blues artists, understanding the depth and authenticity of their expression. However, he also recognized the prevailing cultural barriers of the time. Mainstream radio, largely dominated by white artists and country music, was generally resistant to playing what was then termed race music. Phillips often articulated his belief that if he could find a white singer who possessed the vocal texture, the emotional resonance, and the uninhibited energy of black rhythm and blues artists, while still being palatable to a broader, predominantly white audience, he could bridge a significant cultural divide. He sought someone who could translate that raw, electric feeling, that sense of freedom and passion, into a form that could cross over into popular consciousness. This was not about imitation, but about genuine embodiment, a performer who could truly feel and convey the spirit of the music without sanitizing its essence. He was searching for a specific kind of voice, a unique blend of influences, a sound that could capture the untamed spirit of the blues and infuse it with a new, youthful vitality. This search was not merely a commercial endeavour, it was an artistic quest to unlock a new sonic frontier. Phillips believed that the right artist could ignite a cultural shift, bringing forth a sound that was both familiar and revolutionary. It was this precise philosophy, this focused intention, that would ultimately set the stage for a fateful encounter, one that would alter the course of music history and connect the quiet aspirations of a young truck driver with the ambitious vision of a Memphis record producer. In the summer of 1953, a young Elvis Presley, still working as a truck driver, walked into Sun Records. His initial purpose was not to launch a career, but rather to record a personalized demo for his mother, Gladys, as a birthday gift. For $4, he recorded 2 songs, My Happiness and That's When Your Heartaches Begin, on an acetate disc. This moment was primarily a gesture of filial affection, a son's quiet tribute to his mother, rather than a calculated step toward professional recognition. Marion Keisker, Sam Phillips's assistant, was present during this session. She noted his unusual name and the intriguing quality of his voice, making a mental note of his potential. Several months later, in January 1954, Elvis returned to Sun Records to record another demo, this time paying for 2 more songs, I'll Never Stand in Your Way and It Wouldn't Be the Same Without You. Again, Marion Keisker was attentive. She asked him about his musical background and aspirations, a conversation that subtly acknowledged his unique appeal. While his voice did not immediately strike Phillips as the transformative sound he sought, Keisker's persistent observations and quiet advocacy played a crucial role. She understood that there was something distinct about this young man, a raw, unrefined quality that resonated with the very essence of the music Phillips aimed to champion. The pivotal moment arrived later that year. Sam Phillips, still searching for that elusive white singer who could capture the spirit of rhythm and blues, had been working with guitarist Scotty Moore and bassist Bill Black. They were established local musicians, seasoned by countless performances in Memphis's clubs. Phillips had been trying various singers with them, seeking the right chemistry, but without success. It was Marion Keisker who suggested that Phillips give Elvis Presley a try, reminding him of the young man's distinctive voice and presence. Reluctantly, Phillips agreed to an audition. On July 5, 1954, Elvis joined Moore and Black in the Sun studio. The initial hours were largely unproductive. They played a variety of conventional country and pop tunes, but the spark Phillips was looking for remained absent. The music felt ordinary, lacking the innovation and energy that Phillips envisioned. The session seemed destined to conclude without incident, another failed attempt in Phillips' ongoing search. As the July 5, 1954 recording session at Sun Records drifted toward an uneventful close, a moment of spontaneous release occurred. During a break, Elvis, Scotty Moore, and Bill Black began to playfully jam. Elvis picked up his guitar and started singing That's All Right, an old blues song originally recorded by Arthur Crudup. His rendition was not a mere imitation. It was infused with an exuberant, almost reckless energy. He was not simply covering the song, he was reimagining it, infusing it with his own unique vocal inflections and rhythmic sensibilities. Scotty Moore and Bill Black, caught by the infectious spirit of Elvis's performance, instinctively joined in. Moore's guitar work was fluid and precise, while Black's bass provided a driving rhythmic pulse that propelled the song forward. The sound that emerged was unlike anything they had played together before. It was raw, immediate, and undeniably exciting. The casual, uninhibited atmosphere of the moment allowed a genuine musical chemistry to ignite, as transcending the more formal attempts of the earlier hours. From the control booth, Sam Phillips, who had been on the verge of giving up on the session, heard the sudden eruption of sound. He quickly rushed back into the studio, immediately recognizing that something significant was unfolding. He asked them what they were doing and, sensing the electric atmosphere, urged them to play it again, announcing that he was going to record it. This unplanned, spontaneous outburst was the very sound Phillips had been searching for. It was a fusion, a blend of disparate elements, country, blues, and an undefinable youthful energy that created something entirely new. The recording of That's All Right was completed with a remarkable sense of urgency and excitement. It captured a raw, unpolished energy that defied easy categorization. This was not simply a blues song, it was a country song with a blues feel, a white singer delivering black music with an authenticity that had eluded others. The track was revolutionary, not just for its sound, but for its audacious blending of genres at a time when racial and musical lines were sharply drawn. It became the A-side of Elvis Presley's first single, signaling the arrival of a sound that would soon redefine American popular music. The impact was immediate and profound, marking the true genesis of his recording career and the birth of rock and roll as a discernible force. With the release of That's All Right, Elvis Presley, Scotty Moore, and Bill Black began to perform live, bringing their distinctive sound to audiences across the South. Their initial engagements were often at local clubs, high school auditoriums, and country music shows, where they were typically billed as part of a larger lineup. These early performances were pivotal in establishing Elvis's unique appeal, though they often met with a mixture of confusion and intense fascination. Audiences, accustomed to the more staid presentations of country and western artists, or the smooth vocalists of rhythm and blues, were frequently unprepared for what they witnessed. Elvis's stage presence was raw and uninhibited, a stark contrast to the conventions of the time. He did not simply sing, he embodied the music with his entire being. His movements, particularly his now famous hip swivels and leg shakes, were a spontaneous physical manifestation of the rhythm and emotion he poured into his songs. These early reactions were often characterized by a palpable sense of bewilderment, Some audience members, particularly older, more traditional concertgoers, found his gyrations shocking and even vulgar. There were instances of outright disapproval, yet these reactions were often overshadowed by the burgeoning excitement of a younger demographic. Teenagers, especially young women, were instantly captivated. They responded to his energy with a fervour that was new to the concert halls and dance floors of the era. The combination of his soulful, blues-inflected voice, his country roots, and his electrifying physicality created an experience that transcended traditional musical boundaries. His performances were not merely concerts. They were events that stirred emotions and provoked strong responses, whether positive or negative. The unique blend of his vocal delivery and his provocative stage movements began to forge a powerful connection with his growing fan base, laying the groundwork for the cultural phenomenon he would soon become. These initial engagements, though small in scale, were crucial in refining his stagecraft and solidifying his magnetic appeal. Following the initial, often mixed, reactions to his live performances, Elvis Presley's popularity began to spread like wildfire across the southern states. The momentum was undeniable, propelled by the relentless touring schedule that Scotty Moore, Bill Black and Elvis undertook. They traversed countless miles, performing in small towns and larger cities, bringing their electrifying show to an ever-widening audience. This period marked his transformation from a local curiosity into a regional phenomenon. The distinct sound emanating from his Sun Records releases, coupled with the sheer force of his stage presence, struck a profound chord with a particular demographic, the youth of the 1950s. This was a generation on the cusp of significant social change, often feeling constrained by the strictures of post-war conformity. They sought an outlet for their burgeoning energy, a voice that spoke to their own burgeoning sense of independence and at times rebellion. Elvis provided this in abundance. His music was a vibrant tapestry woven from blues, country and gospel, but delivered with an intensity that transcended genre. It was loud, it was raw, and it was undeniably exciting. The rhythmic drive and the passionate vocal delivery resonated deeply with young people who found the traditional offerings of popular music somewhat sedate. Well, Elvis's music was not just something to listen to, it was something to feel, something to move to. The enthusiasm of his young fans was palpable. They flocked to his performances, drawn by the promise of an experience unlike anything else. His hip swivels, once a source of bewilderment, became symbols of liberation and excitement. Elvis became an emblem of a new cultural energy, a figure who dared to defy conventions. This rapid ascent to regional stardom was not merely a matter of musical talent. It was a phenomenon born from a perfect confluence of an artist, his unique sound, and an audience ready for revolution. The South became his proving ground, a crucible where his legend was forged, preparing him for a much broader stage. As Elvis Presley's regional star continued its ascent across the American South, another figure, with a very different kind of experience, was observing his trajectory with keen interest. This individual was Colonel Tom Parker. His presence would soon become inextricably linked with Elvis's destiny, shaping not only his career, but the very fabric of his public life. Parker was not a musician, nor an artist in the conventional sense. His background was rooted in the transient, vibrant, and often unpredictable world of carnival promotion. He had honed his skills amidst the clamour of fairgrounds and travelling shows, learning the intricate art of attracting crowds, generating excitement, and, crucially, making money. This education had instilled in him a pragmatic, results-oriented approach to entertainment, where spectacle and profit were paramount. Born Andreas Cornelis van Kuijk in Breda, Netherlands, and he'd arrived in the United States as a young man, eventually adopting the name Tom Parker and later acquiring the honorary title of Colonel from Governor Jimmy Davis of Louisiana. This colourful past, shrouded in a degree of carefully cultivated mystery, contributed to his unique persona. He possessed a shrewd, almost instinctual understanding of popular taste and the mechanisms of mass appeal. Before encountering Elvis, Parker had already managed several country music acts, most notably Eddie Arnold and Hank Snow, guiding their careers with a firm hand and an eye for lucrative opportunities. He understood the power of promotion, the value of publicity, and the importance of a carefully crafted image. His methods were often unconventional, but undeniably effective. The meeting of these two disparate personalities, the raw, or untamed musical talent of Elvis Presley and the calculating, seasoned showmanship of Colonel Tom Parker, was a pivotal moment. It set the stage for a partnership that would redefine the music industry and elevate Elvis to an unprecedented level of global fame. Parker recognized in Elvis not just a singer, but a unique phenomenon, a raw diamond with immense commercial potential, and he possessed the singular vision and strategic mind to polish that diamond for the world to see. The burgeoning success of Elvis Presley under Sun Records was undeniable, yet the label's limited resources posed a natural ceiling to his potential reach. Sam Phillips, the visionary behind Sun, had nurtured Elvis's raw talent, but the scale of what Elvis was becoming demanded a different kind of infrastructure. It required the vast promotional machinery, distribution networks, and financial power of a major record label. This understanding culminated in one of the most significant transactions in early rock and roll history. In November of 1955, Colonel Tom Parker orchestrated the sale of Elvis Presley's recording contract from Sun Records to RCA Victor. The sum paid was an unprecedented $40,000. This figure was remarkable for its time, especially for an artist who, while gaining momentum, had not yet achieved national superstardom. Of this amount, $5,000 was a direct bonus to Elvis himself, a substantial sum for the young musician and his family. The remaining $35,000 went to Sam Phillips and Sun Records, providing Phillips with much-needed capital to expand his operations and invest in other burgeoning talents. The decision to sell was a calculated gamble for Sam Phillips, who genuinely believed in Elvis but also recognized the financial limitations of his independent label. For RCA Victor, a venerable institution in the recording industry, the acquisition was a bold strategic move. They were primarily known for their classical, jazz, and established pop artists. Investing such a significant sum in a young, controversial, and genre-defying performer like Elvis was a departure from their usual conservative approach. However, Colonel Parker, with his astute business sense, had successfully convinced RCA of Elvis's immense, untapped potential. He articulated a vision of Elvis transcending regional novelty to become a national and eventually international phenomenon. RCA saw the burgeoning youth market, sensed the shifting tides in popular music, and understood that Elvis, with his unique blend of charisma and musical innovation, was perfectly positioned to capture it. This transfer marked a profound turning point. It propelled Elvis from the independent regional circuit into the mainstream of American popular culture. With RCA's vast resources, extensive marketing capabilities, and nationwide distribution, the stage was now set for Elvis Presley to move beyond the South and truly ignite a cultural revolution across the entire nation, and soon, the world. The modest Sun studio where his sound was born was now behind him, replaced by the grander, more expansive landscape of a major record label, ready to amplify his voice to millions. With the transition to RCA Victor complete, Elvis Presley entered a new phase of his recording career. His first session for the major label took place in Nashville. Tennessee, on January 10th, 1956. Among the songs recorded during these initial RCA sessions was a track titled Heartbreak Hotel. Co-written by Mabor and Axton and Tommy Durden, the song had been presented to Elvis by Colonel Parker. Its melancholic lyrics and bluesy melody resonated deeply with Elvis, who, according to accounts, felt an immediate connection to its forlorn theme. The recording of Heartbreak Hotel captured a raw, almost haunting quality. Elvis's vocals conveyed a profound sense of loneliness and despair, a departure from some of the more overtly exuberant Sun recordings. His delivery was restrained yet intensely emotional, complemented by the sparse instrumentation that allowed his voice to remain at the forefront. The arrangement was simple, yet effective, and creating an atmosphere of stark isolation that perfectly matched the song's narrative. Released as a single on January 27, 1956, Heartbreak Hotel began its ascent. Its sound was distinct from anything else on the airwaves, possessing an edge that appealed to younger audiences while also showcasing a depth that surprised some critics. The record slowly gained traction, moving from regional popularity to national prominence. Within weeks, it began climbing the Billboard charts, a testament to its widespread appeal and Elvis's growing fan base. By April of 1956, Heartbreak Hotel had reached the #1 position on the Billboard Pop Singles chart. This achievement marked his first national chart topper, solidifying his status as a major force in American music. The song remained at the pinnacle for 8 weeks, a remarkable feat that catapulted Elvis Presley from a promising regional talent to a genuine national superstar. Its success was pivotal, demonstrating that the investment made by RCA Victor was not only justified, but had laid the groundwork for an unprecedented cultural phenomenon. The mournful notes of Heartbreak Hotel had opened the door to a new era in popular music, with Elvis Presley standing firmly at its threshold. With Heartbreak Hotel ascending the charts, the burgeoning phenomenon of Elvis Presley was ready for a wider audience. Television, a relatively new but rapidly expanding medium, offered the perfect platform. Colonel Parker, with his astute understanding of mass media, began to book Elvis on prominent national variety shows, strategically exposing him to millions of households across America. And Elvis's earliest national television appearances commenced on Stage Show, a program hosted by the Dorsey brothers. Between January and March of 1956, he made 6 appearances on this show. These initial performances introduced his unique blend of rock and roll music and distinctive stage presence to a broad national viewership. While his movements were already energetic, they were somewhat restrained in these early broadcasts, perhaps a conscious effort to acclimate the audience to his style. However, it was his appearance on The Milton Berle Show on June 5, 1956, that truly ignited both widespread adoration and considerable controversy. For this performance, Elvis delivered a highly charged rendition of Hound Dog. During the song, his movements became more pronounced, more fluid, and undeniably sensual. His gyrating hips and swiveling legs, often referred to as Elvis the Pelvis by critics, were unlike anything seen before on mainstream television. This particular performance, broadcast to a vast audience, instantly transformed him into a cultural flashpoint. The reaction was immediate and polarized. For many younger viewers, Elvis was an electrifying revelation. His uninhibited energy, rebellious spirit, and captivating charisma resonated deeply, solidifying his status as an idol. Teenagers screamed, danced, and emulated his style, drawn to the raw excitement he exuded. Yet, for a significant portion of the adult population, particularly those of older generations, his performance was met with shock, outrage, and moral condemnation. Newspapers across the country carried editorials denouncing his act as vulgar, crude, and a corrupting influence on youth. Parent groups expressed alarm, and religious leaders spoke out against what they perceived as an assault on traditional values. Critics debated the artistic merit of his music and the appropriateness of his stage persona for family viewing. Despite, or perhaps because of, this controversy, Elvis Presley's fame escalated dramatically. The very acts that drew condemnation from some segments of society only served to heighten his allure for others, cementing his image as a defiant icon who challenged the established norms of the era. Television had embraced him, and in doing so had both celebrated and feared the powerful cultural shift he represented. Following the commotion generated by his Milton Berle show performance, the demand for Elvis Presley on television only intensified. Ed Sullivan, the host of the hugely popular Toast of the Town variety show, initially declared he would never feature Elvis on his program, citing his perceived vulgarity. However, the immense rating success of Elvis's appearances on rival shows, particularly the Steve Allen Show, where he was famously presented in a tuxedo singing to a basset hound, prompted Sullivan to reconsider. Colonel Parker, ever the shrewd negotiator, secured a remarkable deal: 3 appearances for an unprecedented fee of $50,000. Elvis's first appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show aired on September the 9th, 1956. Sullivan himself was recovering from a car accident and did not host that evening. Actor Charles Lawton introduced Elvis. The performance was electrifying, and the sheer volume of viewers who tuned in was staggering, estimated at over 60 million people, though representing an astounding 82.6% of the television audience. This single broadcast introduced Elvis to an unprecedented number of American homes, solidifying his status as a national phenomenon. His subsequent appearances on Sullivan's show continued to draw massive audiences. However, it was the third and final appearance on January 6, 1957, that became a defining moment in television history. Due to continued public outcry and moral objections regarding his provocative stage movements, the decision was made to film Elvis only from the waist up. This censorship was a direct response to the controversy that had swirled around his previous performances. During this broadcast, Elvis performed several songs including Hound Dog, Love Me Tender, and Peace in the Valley. Despite the visual restriction, his charisma and vocal power remained undiminished. The waist-up directive inadvertently amplified the focus on his expressive face and powerful voice, creating an indelible image in the collective memory. This particular performance on The Ed Sullivan Show was immensely significant. It represented a curious blend of cultural acceptance and societal unease. While he was now deemed acceptable enough for the most mainstream of television shows, the censorship underscored the lingering anxieties surrounding his impact on American youth. Nevertheless, these appearances cemented Elvis Presley as an undeniable force in American culture, a figure whose presence could no longer be ignored, even if he had to be partially obscured. The Ed Sullivan Show had provided the ultimate validation of his widespread appeal, and even as it had attempted to temper his perceived dangers. The period of 1956 and 1957 marked an astonishing ascent for Elvis Presley, transforming him from a rising star into an unparalleled cultural and commercial force. His recording output during these 2 years was prodigious, and its reception was nothing short of revolutionary. Following the success of Heartbreak Hotel, a string of singles rapidly followed, each seemingly surpassing the last in popularity and sales. In 1956 alone, Elvis released an astonishing 5 singles that reached the #1 position on the Billboard charts: Heartbreak Hotel, I Want You, I Need You, I Love You, Don't Be Cruel, Hound Dog, and Love Me Tender. This level of consistent chart dominance was virtually unprecedented in the nascent rock and roll era. These songs were not merely hits. They became anthems for a generation, played incessantly on radios and, perhaps most significantly, echoing from countless jukeboxes in diners and soda shops across America. He was, in essence, the undisputed jukebox king. Beyond singles, his album releases also shattered sales records. His debut album, Elvis Presley, released in March 1956, became the first rock and roll album to top the Billboard album chart and the first to sell over 1 million copies. This was swiftly followed by Elvis in October 1956, which also reached number 1, demonstrating a sustained demand for his longer-form recordings. The commercial impact extended far beyond music. Colonel Parker, with his astute understanding of market potential, orchestrated an unprecedented merchandise campaign. Everything from Elvis-branded guitars and clothing to fan club memberships, cosmetics, and even I Love Elvis buttons flooded the market. This early, extensive merchandising strategy capitalized on his immense popularity, turning his image into a lucrative brand. The sales of these various products generated millions of dollars, further solidifying his economic power. By the end of 1957, Elvis Presley was not merely a popular musician. He was a phenomenon that permeated every facet of popular culture. His music, his image, and his very persona had become ubiquitous. He had transcended the boundaries of musical genre, becoming a symbol of youthful rebellion and excitement, an artist whose commercial success and cultural influence had set new benchmarks for the entertainment industry. The years 1956 and 1957 were a period of intense creative output and unmatched commercial triumph, cementing his place as an icon. Elvis Presley's emergence did not occur in a vacuum. He arrived at a pivotal moment, becoming a central figure in the broader phenomenon known as the rock and roll revolution. This musical movement was more than just a new style of sound. It represented a significant cultural shift, challenging the established social order and reflecting deep-seated changes within American society. At its core, rock and roll was a fusion of diverse musical traditions, predominantly rhythm and blues, country and gospel. Artists like Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and Jerry Lee Lewis were also instrumental in shaping this new sound. What Elvis brought, however, was a unique synthesis and an unparalleled charisma that propelled this nascent genre into the mainstream with extraordinary force. His early recordings for Sun Records, and later for RCA Victor, were characterized by this potent blend. He took songs originally performed by African-American blues and R&B artists, infusing them with his own distinct vocal inflections and energetic delivery, making them accessible to a wider, predominantly white audience. This blending of musical styles inherently challenged the rigid racial segregation prevalent in the 1950s. While music by black artists had long been popular within their own communities, it rarely crossed over to white audiences on such a massive scale. Elvis's music, by its very nature, blurred these lines, introducing sounds and rhythms that had previously been confined to specific racial demographics. This cultural exchange, though sometimes controversial, began to dismantle invisible barriers, at least within the realm of popular entertainment. Furthermore, Elvis's image and performance style directly confronted the staid conventions of post-war American society. His gyrating hips, his sensual stage presence, and his rebellious sneer were perceived by many adults as vulgar and a threat to moral decency. Yet, for millions of teenagers, these same attributes were liberating and exhilarating. He gave voice and form to an emerging youth culture that felt increasingly disconnected from the traditional values of their parents' generation. The fervour he inspired among young people, often expressed through screaming and fainting at his concerts, highlighted a growing generational divide. In this way, Elvis Presley was not just a performer, but a catalyst for change. He embodied the spirit of a new era, a time when music could not only entertain, but also subtly, yet powerfully, reshape social norms, bridge previously separated communities, and give a distinct identity to a burgeoning youth movement. The rock and roll revolution, with Elvis at its forefront, was a profound cultural earthquake. The meteoric ascent of Elvis Presley, while exhilarating for a burgeoning youth demographic, simultaneously triggered profound social and cultural anxieties among other segments of society. His rise became intertwined with what historians often refer to as a moral panic, a widespread fear that a particular group or phenomenon posed a threat to societal values and the well-being of its youth. For many conservative elements, particularly religious leaders, parent groups, and some civic organizations, Elvis Presley was not merely an entertainer, he represented a dangerous deviation from established norms. The core of this apprehension stemmed from several factors. His music, with its pronounced rhythm and blues influences, was seen by some as primitive or overtly sexual. The sound itself, so different from the sentimental ballads and polite pop of the preceding era, was perceived as noisy and even chaotic. This was coupled with his electrifying stage presence, his famous hip movements, his raw energy, and his sensual expressions were interpreted by critics as vulgar and suggestive. These performances were often described in alarming terms, suggesting they incited lust and promoted juvenile delinquency. Newspapers and television programs frequently featured segments debating the perceived evils of rock and roll and its most visible proponent. There were calls for boycotts of his records and public burning of his merchandise. Sermons were delivered from pulpits warning congregations of the corrupting influence of his music. Some communities even attempted to ban his performances, fearing the impact he would have on local youth. These reactions were not isolated incidents, but reflected a broader societal unease about rapidly changing cultural landscapes. Underlying this moral panic was a deep concern for the innocence of young people. The 1950s was a period often idealized for its traditional family values and social order. Elvis, with his rebellious image and direct appeal to teenage desires, seemed to challenge this perceived stability. He was accused of encouraging disobedience, promiscuity, and a general disregard for adult authority. For parents who had navigated the Great Depression and World War II, the apparent frivolity and overt sensuality of rock and roll felt alien and threatening to the structured world they sought to build for their children. This reaction was also implicitly, and sometimes explicitly, tied to racial anxieties. Rock and roll's roots in African American musical traditions were not lost on its critics. For some, the integration of these musical forms into mainstream white culture was another source of discomfort, further fueling the perception that Elvis and his music were undermining the established racial and social hierarchies. The moral panic surrounding Elvis Presley, therefore, was a complex tapestry of generational misunderstanding, a cultural conservatism, and underlying social anxieties about race and sexuality, all projected onto the figure of a young, charismatic performer. Amidst the swirling currents of cultural adulation and moral apprehension, the strategic architects of Elvis Presley's career, most notably Colonel Tom Parker, began to envision new avenues for his unparalleled popularity. The burgeoning medium of film presented itself as a logical and potentially lucrative expansion. The intention was not merely to exploit his existing fame, but to broaden his appeal, to soften some of the edges that had incited public outcry, and to establish him as a multifaceted entertainer with longevity beyond the fleeting trends of popular music. The decision to transition Elvis into motion pictures was a calculated move to secure his enduring presence in the entertainment landscape. It offered a means to present him in a more controlled environment, potentially mitigating the raw, untamed energy that had both captivated and scandalized audiences during his live performances and television appearances. The film industry, with its established narrative structures and broader demographic reach, promised a more stable platform for a star of his magnitude. His cinematic debut arrived with a film initially titled The Reno Brothers, later renamed Love Me Tender. Released in November 1956, this Western drama offered Elvis a supporting role, allowing him to ease into the demands of acting without the full weight of carrying an entire production. He played Clint Reno, the youngest of four brothers caught in the aftermath of the American Civil War. The plot involved themes of family loyalty, mistaken identity, and tragic romance, providing a backdrop that allowed for a few musical interludes, though these were integrated into the narrative rather than being the sole focus. The initial reception to Elvis's acting was predictably varied and coloured by pre-existing opinions of his musical persona. Critics, many of whom had already formed strong views on his rock and roll performances, often approached his acting with a degree of skepticism. Some reviews acknowledged a nascent natural charisma and a certain screen presence, suggesting a potential for development. Others were less forgiving, dismissing his performance as amateurish or merely a vehicle for his singing. However, the public's response was undeniable. Love Me Tender was an immediate box office success, driven almost entirely by the fervent loyalty of his fan base. Queues formed around theatres, and the film quickly recouped its production costs and generated substantial profits. This commercial triumph, irrespective of critical appraisal, solidified the notion that Elvis Presley was a bankable star in the realm of cinema. It demonstrated that his appeal transcended the concert stage and the recording studio, confirming the viability of a parallel career in Hollywood. This initial foray into film, while not universally acclaimed for its artistic merit, was a crucial step in diversifying his career and further cementing his iconic status. As the whirlwind of fame intensified, bringing with it both immense professional opportunity and relentless public scrutiny, Elvis Presley sought a more substantial and private dwelling for himself and his family. The modest home on Audubon Drive, which he had purchased with his initial earnings, was no longer sufficient to provide the necessary sanctuary from the ever-present crowds and the growing demands on his privacy. In the spring of 1957, a significant acquisition was made that would forever be linked with his legacy: the purchase of Graceland. Graceland, a colonial revival mansion situated on a sprawling estate in Memphis, Tennessee, was acquired for a sum of just over $100,000. For Elvis, who'd grown up in the profound humility of poverty, this grand residence represented a tangible manifestation of his extraordinary success, and it was a testament to how far he had come from the shotgun shack in Tupelo, Mississippi, and the public housing projects of Memphis. The move to Graceland was not merely an upgrade in living conditions, it was a profound statement of arrival, a symbol of his unprecedented achievements. Beyond its symbolic value, Graceland rapidly transformed into the heart of his personal world. It became a cherished private refuge, a place where he could momentarily retreat from the clamour of his public life. Within its walls, he was not the rock and roll sensation, but simply Elvis, the son, the friend, the man seeking moments of normalcy. The estate offered a sense of enclosure and protection, a much-needed buffer against the constant intrusion of fans and the press. More profoundly, Graceland became the central family home, a place where his parents, Ms. Vernon and Gladys, could reside comfortably, and where a close-knit circle of relatives and friends often gathered. It was a space for quiet evenings, for impromptu jam sessions with friends, and for simply being himself, away from the relentless demands of his career. For Gladys in particular, it was a source of immense pride and comfort, a place where she could enjoy the fruits of her son's labour in a grand, secure setting. The estate provided a sense of stability and belonging, a grounding presence in a life that was otherwise characterized by constant movement and change. Graceland was thus more than just a house. It was a sanctuary, a symbol, and the emotional anchor for Elvis and those closest to him. In the midst of his burgeoning career, a significant turning point arrived with the call to national service. In December 1957, Elvis Presley received his draft notice, formally inducting him into the United States Army. The news sent ripples through the entertainment world and among his vast fan base. For many, the idea of the audacious rock and roll icon trading his glittering costumes for a military uniform seemed almost unimaginable. The public reaction was multifaceted, ranging from dismay among his most ardent admirers who feared his career would stall, to a quiet sense of approval from those who viewed military service as a patriotic duty and perhaps an opportunity to temper his rebellious image. Colonel Tom Parker, ever the astute manager, approached this inevitable development with a calculated strategy. Despite the immense commercial implications of a 2-year hiatus, Parker made a deliberate decision that Elvis should serve as a regular soldier. Then, rather than accepting offers for special services entertainment roles, the military had in fact suggested that Elvis could be placed in a non-combat role, performing for the troops and utilizing his celebrity status for recruitment and morale. However, Parker firmly believed that such an arrangement would be detrimental to Elvis's public perception in the long term. Parker understood that serving as a regular GI, undergoing the same training and experiencing the same conditions as any other draftee, would resonate powerfully with the American public. It would demonstrate humility, patriotism, and a willingness to fulfill civic duty, potentially softening the edgier aspects of his rock and roll persona that had drawn criticism from more conservative segments of society. This strategic choice aimed to broaden his appeal and present him as a more wholesome, relatable figure, a young man who, despite his fame, was still willing to serve his country. Thus, in March 1958, Elvis Presley reported for duty at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, to begin his basic training. The images of him receiving his haircut, shedding his iconic pompadour for a standard military cut, were widely circulated, marking a definitive moment in his public narrative. This commitment to serving as an ordinary soldier was a carefully managed public relations maneuver, designed not only to fulfill a requirement, but to strategically reposition Elvis Presley in the eyes of the nation. Following his basic training, Elvis Presley was deployed to West Germany in September 1958, joining the 3rd Armoured Division in Friedberg. His time there, though marked by military discipline and the routines of army life, also offered a degree of anonymity not experienced since before his rise to fame. While still recognized, the structured environment of the barracks and the distance from the American entertainment machine provided a different kind of existence. During this period, Elvis continued to grieve the loss of his mother, Gladys, who had passed away shortly before his deployment, a profound personal sorrow that lingered throughout his service. It was within this setting, far from the familiar landscapes of Memphis, that a new personal connection began to form. In the autumn of 1959, at a party hosted at his off-base residence in Bad Nauheim, Elvis met Priscilla Ann Beaulieu. She was then a mere 14 years old, yet the stepdaughter of an American Air Force officer also stationed in Germany. The initial encounter was a quiet affair, a young girl introduced to the world-famous soldier. Despite the significant age difference and the considerable chasm in their life experiences, an immediate connection was perceived. Their relationship developed gradually, marked by a series of conversations and shared moments. Elvis, grappling with the absence of his familiar life and the profound grief for his mother, found a receptive listener in Priscilla. She, in turn, was drawn into his orbit, experiencing a world far removed from her own teenage existence. The circumstances of their meeting, A young American girl living abroad and the internationally renowned figure serving his country created a unique dynamic. The early stages of their relationship were discreet, unfolding within the private confines of Elvis's German residence, away from the intense scrutiny that had characterized his life in the United States. This period in Germany thus became a crucible for a pivotal personal development, laying the groundwork for a connection that would eventually lead to marriage and become a defining aspect of his later life. His military service, therefore, was not merely a professional pause, but a time of profound personal transformation, culminating in this significant meeting. The strategic management of Elvis Presley's military service, designed to bolster his public image, could not shield him from profound personal sorrow. While undergoing basic training at Fort Hood, Texas, in the summer of 1958, his mother, Gladys Love Presley, fell gravely ill. Her health had been declining for some time, exacerbated by liver complications. The news reached Elvis, prompting him to secure emergency leave to be by her side in Memphis. He arrived at the hospital on August 12th, finding her condition critical. Gladys was the unwavering anchor of Elvis's life, a constant presence from his earliest days in Tupelo. Their bond was exceptionally deep, forged in the shared experiences of poverty and mutual support. She had always been his most ardent supporter, his confidant, and the grounding force amidst the whirlwind of his burgeoning fame. Her love was unconditional, a source of comfort and stability that few others could provide. The sudden, intense demands of his career had brought immense joy and material wealth, yet it also introduced strains and anxieties which Gladys often absorbed. On August 14, 1958, Gladys Presley passed away at the age of 46. The loss devastated Elvis. His grief was raw and public, captured in photographs and accounts of the funeral at Forest Hill Cemetery. He wept openly, expressing the profound emptiness her absence created. The umbilical cord, as some have described their connection, had been severed, leaving an irreparable void. The man who had commanded stages and captivated millions was, in that moment, a son consumed by sorrow. This tragedy profoundly impacted Elvis, shaping his emotional landscape for the remainder of his life. The protective cocoon Gladys had provided was gone, and he struggled to reconcile his immense success with such a fundamental personal loss. Her death became a shadow that followed him, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the irreplaceable nature of genuine love. It was a wound that never fully healed, influencing his relationships and his solitary moments for decades to come. His deployment to Germany, which followed soon after, would carry this heavy burden of grief across the Atlantic. After 2 years of military service, a period marked by both personal development and profound grief, Elvis Presley's return to civilian life was met with immense national anticipation. The public, which had watched their idol transition from a rebellious youth icon into a disciplined soldier, eagerly awaited his re-entry into the entertainment world. Colonel Tom Parker had meticulously cultivated this anticipation, ensuring that Elvis's absence from the spotlight only intensified the desire for his comeback. The narrative of G.I. Elvis had successfully broadened his appeal, presenting him as a mature, patriotic figure who had fulfilled his civic duty. On March 2, 1960, Elvis arrived back in the United States, landing at McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. His discharge from active duty was officially completed on March 5th. The press was there in force, eager to capture every moment of his return. He greeted reporters with a new demeanour, a slightly more polished and composed version of the electrifying performer who had departed. His hair, once a rebellious cascade, was now shorter, reflecting the military cut, though it would soon return to its iconic style. The transition back to his musical career was immediate and strategically orchestrated. Within days of his discharge, Elvis was in a recording studio. His first post-army recording session, held on March 20th and 21st, 1960, at RCA's Nashville studios, was a pivotal moment. The material chosen for these sessions aimed to re-establish his commercial dominance and reassure his vast fan base. The recording of Stuck on You, quickly followed by Fame and Fortune, showcased a slightly mellower, yet still unmistakably Elvis sound. Stuck on You was released as a single in late March 1960, and it immediately soared to the top of the charts, becoming his first #1 hit since his return. This rapid ascent demonstrated the enduring power of his star appeal and the effectiveness of Parker's careful planning. The song itself, an upbeat rock and roll tune with a catchy melody, proved that Elvis had lost none of his ability to connect with audiences. This was not merely a comeback. It was a powerful reassertion of his status as the undisputed king of rock and roll. The success of Stuck on You was swiftly followed by A Mess of Blues and the iconic ballad It's Now or Never, further cementing his musical resurgence. These early 1960 releases confirmed that Elvis Presley, the GY who had served his country, was now GY Elvis, a refined and even more beloved entertainer, ready to embark on the next phase of his extraordinary career, one that would increasingly turn its attention towards the silver screen. With his musical comeback firmly established, the strategic focus for Elvis Presley's career shifted predominantly to Hollywood throughout the 1960s. Colonel Tom Parker envisioned a future for Elvis as a major film star, believing that movies offered a more stable and lucrative path than the demanding schedule of live performances and recording sessions. This vision led to an extensive series of films, largely musical comedies, that would define a significant portion of Elvis's professional life during this decade. Beginning with GI Blues in 1960, which capitalized on his recent military service, Elvis embarked on a prolific filmmaking schedule. The formula quickly became apparent. Light-hearted plots, exotic locales, beautiful co-stars and numerous musical numbers. Films such as Blue Hawaii, 1961, Girls, 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 1962, Fun in Acapulco, 1963, and Viva Las Vegas, 1964, were box office successes. They consistently generated substantial revenue, proving the commercial viability of the Elvis Presley film brand. These movies presented a clean-cut, charismatic Elvis, often in roles that required little acting depth, but allowed him to sing a collection of new songs. From a commercial standpoint, this strategy was undeniably effective. Elvis Presley films consistently ranked among the top-grossing pictures of their time, drawing large audiences both domestically and internationally. The soundtracks accompanying these films were also highly successful, providing a steady stream of revenue for RCA and further solidifying Elvis's financial standing. For Colonel Parker, the formula was a proven winner, minimizing risk and maximizing profit. However, from an artistic perspective, the repetitive nature of these productions began to take a toll. The scripts were often formulaic, the musical numbers predictable, and the characters superficial. Elvis, Cesar, who had initially harboured hopes of becoming a serious dramatic actor, found himself increasingly confined by these limitations. He yearned for roles that would challenge his abilities and allow him to demonstrate a broader range of talent. This growing frustration was palpable to those around him. He felt creatively stifled, trapped in a cycle of interchangeable parts and forgettable songs that were churned out at a rapid pace. The quality of the music suffered as well, as songs were often written specifically to fit into the film's narrative rather than for their standalone artistic merit. While the films continued to be financially successful, a subtle but significant disconnect began to emerge between the public's perception of Elvis, the movie star, and the artist's own aspirations. The extensive film career of the 1960s had a profound and transformative impact on Elvis Presley's musical output. With nearly all of his cinematic ventures being musical comedies, a constant demand for new songs arose, leading to the production of numerous soundtrack albums. These albums became the primary vehicle for his musical releases throughout the decade, effectively dictating the sound and style of his recordings. The sheer volume of films meant that a significant portion of his studio time was dedicated to recording songs specifically for these soundtracks. Often, the quality of these compositions varied greatly, dictated by the immediate needs of the film's plot rather than artistic inspiration. The urgency of production schedules frequently left little room for creative exploration or the meticulous crafting of music that had characterized his earlier work. This environment naturally led to a shift away from the raw, rebellious energy that had defined his initial rise to prominence. The spontaneous, groundbreaking fusion of gospel, blues, and country that had once electrified audiences gradually receded. In its place emerged a more polished mainstream pop sound, designed to appeal to the broadest possible audience for his family-friendly films. The edginess and visceral power of his early rock and roll were largely replaced by ballads and upbeat, albeit often generic pop tunes. While some memorable songs did emerge from this period, and such as Can't Help Falling in Love, the overall trajectory of his music moved towards a more conventional and less innovative style. This era saw Elvis recording fewer non-film studio albums. His creative energies were channeled into fulfilling the requirements of the movie machine. The focus was on commercial appeal and fitting the songs within the context of the film's narrative, rather than pushing musical boundaries or exploring deeper artistic expressions. Consequently, the soundtrack era represents a distinct chapter in Elvis Presley's musical evolution, one characterized by commercial success, but also by a perceptible departure from the groundbreaking sound that had initially established him as a revolutionary force in popular music. As Elvis Presley's fame escalated, so too did the necessity for a constant support system, leading to the formation of a loyal, ever-present entourage known colloquially as the Memphis Mafia. This group, largely composed of childhood friends, distant relatives and acquaintances from his early days, became an integral part of his daily life. Their presence was a constant, whether at Graceland, on film sets in Hollywood, or during his rare public appearances. Their roles were multifaceted and often fluid. On one level, they served as companions, providing a familiar circle of trust in an otherwise overwhelming and often isolating world of superstardom. They shared meals, played games, and simply passed the time, offering a semblance of normalcy amidst the extraordinary circumstances of Elvis's existence. Beyond camaraderie, many members also functioned as unofficial bodyguards, forming a physical buffer between Elvis and the clamouring public. Their presence offered a layer of security and privacy, managing access and ensuring his personal space was respected. More intimately, they were confidants. In a world where genuine trust was a rare commodity, these individuals were privy to his thoughts, anxieties, and desires. They offered a sounding board, a sympathetic ear, and a source of unfiltered feedback, however carefully delivered. This close-knit group helped to create an insular world around Elvis, a protective bubble that shielded him from the relentless demands of fame and the often harsh realities of the outside world. This constant companionship, while providing comfort and security, also contributed to a degree of isolation. The Memphis Mafia became his primary social circle, yet limiting his interactions with those outside this immediate sphere. Their collective presence formed a unique ecosystem, where Elvis was the undisputed centre and their lives revolved around his. This arrangement fostered a sense of loyalty and mutual dependence, creating a private universe where the rules and rhythms were largely set by Elvis himself. The Memphis Mafia therefore, was not merely an entourage, but a fundamental component of his daily existence, shaping his experiences and influencing the environment in which he lived and worked. The relationship between Elvis Presley and Priscilla Beaulieu, which had developed privately over many years, culminated in their marriage on May 1st, 1967. The ceremony took place in Las Vegas at the Aladdin Hotel, a choice that reflected both a desire for a degree of discretion and the practicalities of Elvis's demanding schedule. It was not a grand public spectacle, but rather a relatively intimate affair, attended by a select group of family and close friends, including members of the Memphis Mafia. Colonel Tom Parker, ever the strategist, orchestrated the event with an eye towards managing public perception while minimizing potential disruptions. Despite the efforts to keep the details contained, the marriage of Elvis Presley, the world's most famous entertainer, was an event of considerable public interest. News of the impending nuptials had circulated, fueling anticipation among his vast fan base. Photographs from the ceremony, when released, were eagerly consumed, offering a rare glimpse into the personal life of a figure who typically existed behind a carefully constructed veil of celebrity. Priscilla, elegant in her white gown, and Elvis, distinguished in a dark brocade tuxedo, presented a picture of conventional romance, a stark contrast to the rebellious image that had defined his early career. For Elvis, the marriage to Priscilla represented a significant step into a more settled domestic chapter of his life. Their relationship had matured over nearly a decade, during which Priscilla had lived at Graceland, adapting to the unique rhythms and expectations of Elvis's world. The marriage was an attempt to formalize this long-standing partnership, to create a stable foundation amidst the swirling chaos of his professional life. Maintaining a semblance of privacy around their relationship, even after the wedding, remained a constant endeavor. While the public was aware of their union, the intimate details of their life together were largely shielded from scrutiny. This balance between public recognition and private sanctuary was a defining characteristic of Elvis's existence, and his marriage to Priscilla was no exception. It was a union under the intense gaze of the world, yet one that sought to carve out its own quiet space within the vastness of his fame. A little over 9 months after their wedding, on February 1st, 1968, Elvis and Priscilla Presley welcomed their only child, a daughter named Lisa Marie. The birth occurred at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, the city that had become synonymous with Elvis's home and roots. This event marked a profound and deeply personal milestone in Elvis's life, bringing a new dimension to his existence beyond the demands of his career and the constant glare of public attention. The arrival of Lisa Marie was a source of immense joy for both Elvis and Priscilla. For Elvis, who had experienced the profound loss of his mother Gladys a decade earlier, the birth of his daughter brought a renewed sense of purpose and a different kind of familial connection. He had often expressed a desire for a family, and Lisa Marie's arrival fulfilled that long-held wish. Photographs from this period show a beaming Elvis, clearly captivated by his newborn daughter, holding her with a tenderness that offered a glimpse into his private affections. The significance of Lisa Marie's birth extended beyond the immediate happiness it brought. It anchored Elvis more firmly to his home life, providing a counterpoint to the increasingly detached and manufactured world of his film career. While his professional endeavors often felt distant from his true artistic inclinations, his role as a father was immediate and tangible. He embraced this new chapter with enthusiasm, creating a nurturing environment for his daughter at Graceland. The presence of Lisa Marie brought a unique warmth and energy to the Presley household. She became the center of attention, a cherished addition to the family unit. For Elvis, whose life was often characterized by a sense of isolation despite being constantly surrounded by people, his daughter offered an unconditional connection. Her birth was a quiet, personal triumph, a moment of unadulterated happiness that resonated deeply within his carefully constructed world, providing a profound personal anchor amidst the shifting tides of his public life. By the mid-1960s, Elvis Presley's musical career had largely been confined to the saccharine soundtracks of his Hollywood films. His once electrifying stage presence and raw musicality had been overshadowed by a string of formulaic movie roles. However, in December 1968, a pivotal moment arrived that would dramatically redefine his artistic trajectory. The television special, initially titled Elvis, but now widely known as the '68 Comeback Special. This special was conceived as a vehicle for reinvention, a deliberate effort to re-establish Elvis as a vital and relevant musical force. The initial concept proposed by Colonel Parker was a harmless Christmas special filled with carols and festive cheer. However, thus director Steve Binder envisioned something far more audacious and authentic. Binder pushed for a return to Elvis's roots, a raw, unfiltered showcase of his true musical talent and charisma. He understood that the public yearned to see the Elvis who had once captivated audiences with his electrifying performances, not merely the diluted version presented on the silver screen. The special was a bold departure from his recent work. It featured intimate, informal performances in a sit-down setting, where Elvis, dressed in black leather, engaged directly with his original band members, sharing anecdotes and performing stripped-down versions of his early hits. These segments captured an unprecedented intimacy and spontaneity, revealing an Elvis who was relaxed, confident, and utterly compelling. His voice, still powerful and nuanced, soared through blues, gospel, and rock and roll numbers, reminding audiences of his extraordinary vocal range and emotional depth. Beyond the acoustic sets, the special also included elaborate production numbers, culminating in a powerful medley of his greatest hits. The visual impact was undeniable. Elvis, commanding the stage with renewed vigor, exuded an almost primal energy. His movements were fluid, his gaze intense, and his connection with the music palpable. The '68 Comeback Special was a triumph, not only for its critical and commercial success, but for its profound impact on Elvis himself. It rekindled his passion for live performance and reasserted his status as an unparalleled entertainer, proving that his raw talent and electrifying stage presence were not merely relics of the past, but powerful forces still capable of captivating the world. Following the resounding success of the '68 Comeback Special, Elvis Presley embarked upon a new chapter in his performing career, one that would solidify his status as a live entertainment phenomenon. In July 1969, he made his triumphant return to the live stage with a residency at the International Hotel in Las Vegas. This engagement marked a significant pivot from his previous concert tours and film commitments, establishing a new paradigm for his artistic expression. The Las Vegas residency was not merely a series of concerts. It was a grand spectacle, meticulously designed to showcase a more mature and sophisticated Elvis. The stage shows were elaborate affairs featuring a large orchestra, a gospel vocal group known as the Imperials, and a female vocal group, so the Sweet Inspirations. This expanded musical ensemble allowed for richer arrangements of his classic hits and provided a lush backdrop for his powerful voice. The atmosphere was one of opulent entertainment, a far cry from the raw, spontaneous energy of his early rock and roll performances, yet equally captivating in its own right. Visually, this period became synonymous with the iconic jumpsuits. These custom-designed outfits, often heavily embellished with sequins, rhinestones, and intricate embroidery, became an integral part of his stage persona. They were not merely costumes, they were extensions of his larger-than-life presence, signalling a transformation into a true showman. Each jumpsuit, with its dramatic flared trousers and high collar, emphasized his movements and added to the theatricality of the performance. During these engagements, Elvis cultivated a refined showman persona. He commanded the stage with an undeniable charisma, engaging with the audience through a blend of humor, self-deprecating remarks, and moments of profound musical intensity. His set lists were carefully curated, blending his early rock and roll anthems with contemporary pop ballads and gospel numbers, demonstrating his versatility as a vocalist. This period in Las Vegas solidified his reputation as a formidable live performer, capable of delivering a spectacular and emotionally resonant show night after night. The residency marked a significant and successful evolution in his public identity, firmly establishing him as a Las Vegas legend. Concurrent with his re-emergence as a compelling live performer, then Elvis Presley also experienced a significant creative resurgence in the recording studio. This period was epitomized by the album From Elvis in Memphis, released in June 1969. Recorded at American Sound Studio in Memphis, Tennessee, with a new set of musicians and producers, this album marked a deliberate departure from the soundtrack recordings that had dominated his output for much of the 1960s. The sessions at American Sound Studio, under the guidance of producer Chips Moman, allowed Elvis to explore a more contemporary sound, blending elements of soul, R&B, and country in a sophisticated manner. The atmosphere in the studio was reportedly relaxed and conducive to experimentation, enabling Elvis to delve deeply into the emotional content of the material. This environment fostered some of his most critically acclaimed work, all showcasing a vocal maturity and interpretive depth that had been less evident in his more commercial film-related recordings. From this album emerged two of his most enduring and successful singles. In the Ghetto, released in April 1969, was a socially conscious ballad that addressed cycles of poverty and violence. Its poignant narrative and Elvis's heartfelt delivery resonated deeply with audiences, demonstrating his capacity to tackle serious themes. The song became a major international hit, signifying a renewed relevance for Elvis in the popular music landscape. Suspicious Minds, released later that year in August 1969, became a monumental success, marking his final #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 chart during his lifetime. This song, with its dynamic arrangement, driving rhythm section, and Elvis's powerful and impassioned vocals, captured a raw energy reminiscent of his earlier work, yet with a modern sensibility. It became a staple of his live performances, often extended with dramatic flourishes and intense vocal improvisations. From Elvis in Memphis was widely praised by critics and fans alike, seen as a powerful statement of artistic intent. It demonstrated that Elvis was not merely a nostalgic act, but a contemporary artist capable of producing relevant and emotionally resonant music. This album, along with the subsequent success of its singles, firmly established this period as a profound creative high point, cementing his return to musical prominence. In January 1973, Elvis Presley achieved an unprecedented global milestone with his concert, Aloha from Hawaii via satellite. This event was not merely another performance. No, it was a groundbreaking television special that redefined the possibilities of live entertainment. Broadcast from the Honolulu International Center Arena, the concert was beamed live via satellite to countries across Asia and Europe, making it the first globally televised concert by a solo artist. The sheer scale of the undertaking was immense. The decision to utilize satellite technology was a deliberate strategy to reach an audience far beyond the confines of a concert hall or even a national broadcast. This ambitious endeavor was orchestrated to showcase Elvis to a truly international viewership, solidifying his status as a global icon. The concert was designed as a charity event, benefiting the Quealy Cancer Fund, adding a philanthropic dimension to its grand scale. The visual spectacle of Aloha from Hawaii was as significant as its technological innovation. Elvis appeared in an elaborate white American Eagle jumpsuit, adorned with intricate, sparkling details and a flowing cape. This iconic costume, a symbol of his later career, further amplified the sense of grandiosity surrounding the event. His performance was characterized by a powerful vocal delivery and a commanding stage presence, featuring many of his classic hits alongside contemporary material. The global reach of Aloha from Hawaii via satellite was staggering. It was estimated that over 1 billion people worldwide tuned in to watch the concert, an audience figure that was truly unprecedented for a single artist at that time. This massive viewership underscored Elvis's enduring appeal and his ability to transcend cultural and geographical boundaries. For many around the world, this concert was their first direct experience of Elvis performing live, presenting him as a vibrant and vital entertainer on a global stage. The broadcast was subsequently aired in the United States in April 1973, achieving high ratings and further cementing its legendary status. Following the immense triumph of Aloha from Hawaii, a more somber narrative began to unfold in Elvis Presley's life. The very fame that had brought him unparalleled success also created an increasingly complex and isolating existence. The demands of constant touring, the pressures of maintaining his public image, and the relentless scrutiny from the media and fans began to take a significant toll. Graceland, once a sanctuary, gradually became a more insular world, a fortress against the outside where the lines between professional life and personal space blurred. The intense schedule of his Las Vegas residencies and subsequent tours, though financially rewarding, left a little room for genuine personal reflection or quietude. Each performance required an immense expenditure of energy, and the subsequent need for rest and recuperation often led to cycles of exhaustion. Within this demanding environment, a growing reliance on prescription medication began to emerge as a coping mechanism. Initially intended to assist with sleep or to provide energy for performances, the use of these substances gradually intensified. The world around Elvis became increasingly filtered through the lens of his inner circle, the Memphis Mafia. While these loyal companions provided a sense of comfort and security, their constant presence also contributed to his growing detachment from ordinary life. The ability to move freely, to experience anonymity, or to engage in simple, unobserved interactions became nearly impossible. This perpetual state of being watched, even by those closest to him, fostered a sense of profound isolation. The pressures of maintaining his iconic status were immense. Every appearance, every song, every decision was weighed against the expectations of millions. This burden, coupled with the artificial environment of his daily life, exacerbated his struggles. The distinction between the public Elvis and the private individual became increasingly blurred, making it difficult for him to find moments of authentic self-expression outside of his music. This period marked a subtle but significant shift, as the joy and vitality that once characterized his early career began to be overshadowed by the quiet weight of his extraordinary life. Amidst the professional highs of the early 1970s, Elvis Presley's personal life was undergoing a profound and difficult transformation. The complexities of his unique existence, characterized by constant touring, an insular environment, and the omnipresent glare of fame, had placed an unbearable strain on his marriage to Priscilla. Despite their shared history and the birth of their daughter, Lisa Marie, the distance between them had grown, both emotionally and physically. In October of 1973, their divorce was finalized. This formal separation marked a deeply painful chapter for Elvis. His marriage to Priscilla represented a significant anchor in his adult life, a connection to a more conventional domesticity that was often elusive amidst his superstar persona. The dissolution of this bond was not a casual event, but a source of genuine heartbreak and sorrow, contributing to the emotional weight he was already carrying. The public, who had long viewed Elvis and Priscilla as a fairy tale couple, watched as this personal tragedy unfolded. While the intimate details remained largely private, the knowledge of their divorce became another facet of his increasingly scrutinized personal narrative. For many, it underscored the notion that even the most successful figures could not escape the universal experiences of loss and marital difficulty. For Elvis himself, the divorce compounded his existing feelings of isolation. The stability and companionship that Priscilla had provided, even amidst their difficulties, were now gone. This void was particularly keenly felt in the quiet moments away from the stage, when the adulation of the crowd receded. The emotional toll was considerable, contributing to a deeper sense of melancholy that would become more evident in the years that followed. He continued to perform with his characteristic intensity, but beneath the surface the wound of this separation remained, a quiet ache in the life of a man who had everything, yet often felt profoundly alone. As the mid-1970s unfolded, a noticeable shift began to occur in Elvis Presley's physical presentation and stage presence. The relentless schedule of tours and performances, coupled with the profound emotional stresses he'd endured, started to manifest in his outward appearance and his capacity to perform. His earlier reliance on prescription medication, initially utilized to manage the demands of his career and his sleep cycles, gradually intensified. This increased medication use, intended to alleviate various ailments and anxieties, began to impact his overall health. His once lithe and dynamic physique grew heavier, and the sharp, energetic movements that defined his earlier stage persona occasionally seemed more laboured. Audiences and observers, accustomed to the vibrant, almost superhuman energy of Elvis, began to perceive a more subdued and, at times, a more vulnerable figure on stage. The effects were not always consistent, but they were increasingly present. His performances, while still capable of moments of brilliance and powerful vocal delivery, could sometimes be uneven. There were instances where his focus seemed to waver, or his energy levels appeared diminished, a stark contrast to the sustained intensity of his earlier years. This was not a sudden deterioration, but a gradual progression, a slow dimming of the bright light that had once burned with such relentless force. His face, once a picture of youthful vitality, began to show the strain of a life lived under extraordinary pressure. The youthful contours softened, and a certain weariness settled into his features. This physical transformation was a quiet testament to the internal battles he was fighting, a visible manifestation of the toll that his unique existence, with its unique pressures and coping mechanisms, was taking. It was a sombre evolution, observed by many, understood by few, yet as the king of rock and roll navigated a path increasingly fraught with personal challenge. Despite the increasing challenges to his health and well-being, the touring schedule for Elvis Presley remained remarkably relentless throughout the mid-1970s. The demands placed upon him were substantial, requiring him to travel across the country, performing multiple shows each week. This continued commitment to live performance persisted even as the physical and emotional toll became more pronounced. The sheer volume of these engagements suggested a profound dedication to his craft and, perhaps more significantly, to the expectations of his vast audience. He continued to appear before tens of thousands of people night after night in arenas and concert halls across America. This unwavering presence on the road, despite his visible struggles, underscored a deep-seated sense of responsibility to the fans who had supported him for decades. For Elvis, the stage was a familiar place, a space where he had always connected profoundly with others. Even as his physical condition deteriorated, the act of performing remained a central pillar of his existence. There was a quiet determination in his continued appearances, a silent acknowledgement of the bond he shared with those who came to see him. The energy he expended on stage, even when not at his peak, was a testament to his enduring commitment. These final tours therefore represented a period of immense internal struggle, waged largely in the public eye. His performances, though sometimes uneven, were met with unwavering adoration. The crowds continued to flock to his concerts, as drawn by the enduring mystique and the powerful legacy of his music. He would often speak directly to his audiences, expressing gratitude and attempting to bridge the growing gap between his inner reality and his public persona. In these moments, the connection between artist and admirer remained tangible, a testament to the powerful resonance of his artistry, even in the face of his personal decline. The road became his final stage, a place where he continued to offer what he could until he could no longer. The relentless touring schedule that had defined Elvis Presley's professional life in the mid-1970s culminated in a final concert performance on June 26, 1977. The setting for this occasion was the Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, Indiana. It was a typical Sunday evening, and thousands of fans gathered, as they had done countless times before, to witness the man who had shaped popular music for a generation. This particular evening unfolded much like many others during that period. Elvis took to the stage, performing a selection of his most beloved songs, interspersed with newer material. The show included his signature moves, the quiet intensity, and the occasional self-deprecating humour that had become characteristic of his later performances. He connected with the audience, signed autographs and offered scarves, creating those small, personal moments that fans cherished. Yet, there was an underlying somberness that, in retrospect, seemed to permeate the atmosphere. While the energy of a live performance was present, the physical toll of his lifestyle and health struggles was increasingly evident. His voice, though still powerful, sometimes showed signs of strain. His movements, while still possessing a certain grace, lacked the unbridled athleticism of his earlier years. The concert concluded with his customary farewell. The lights dimmed, and the roar of the crowd gradually faded. As he left the stage that night, no one present could have known that this would be his last public appearance. It was simply another stop on a long and demanding tour. There were more dates scheduled, more cities to visit, more audiences to entertain. The sheer normalcy of that final performance, devoid of any grand pronouncements or dramatic farewells, imbued it with a quiet poignancy. It was an ordinary ending to an extraordinary career, a final chapter written without the knowledge of its impending conclusion. The applause in Indianapolis on that June night was the last live ovation Elvis Presley would ever receive, a final echo of the sound that had accompanied him for over 2 decades. The morning of August 16th, 1977, began quietly at Graceland, Elvis Presley's home in Memphis, Tennessee. The previous night had been spent in familiar fashion, with friends and companions, a common occurrence in his private world. He had retired to his private suite in the early hours, as was his custom, accompanied by his then-girlfriend Ginger Alden. Later that morning, at approximately 2 p.m, Ginger Alden discovered Elvis unconscious in his bathroom. The immediate response was one of urgency and alarm. Efforts were made to revive him, first by Alden herself, and then by other members of his entourage who were quickly alerted to the situation. The household became a scene of quiet, frantic activity as the gravity of the moment became clear. Emergency services were promptly called. Paramedics arrived at Graceland shortly thereafter, responding to the urgent dispatch. They found Elvis unresponsive and immediately initiated resuscitation efforts. These efforts continued as he was transported by ambulance from Graceland to Baptist Memorial Hospital, a journey of a few miles through the familiar streets of Memphis. Upon arrival at the hospital, medical personnel continued their attempts to revive him. A team of doctors worked diligently, employing all available medical procedures to restore his vital signs. Despite these extensive efforts, which continued for an extended period, Elvis Presley could not be resuscitated. At approximately 3:30 p.m. on August 16, 1977, he was officially pronounced dead. He was 42 years old. The cause of death was later officially attributed to cardiac arrest. This immediate medical finding would eventually be accompanied by a deeper understanding of the contributing factors, including the long-term effects of his prescribed medication use and an underlying heart condition. The news of his passing, once confirmed, spread with astonishing speed, first through Memphis, then across the United States, and finally around the world. It was a moment of profound shock and disbelief for millions. The quiet, private tragedy at Graceland quickly transformed into a global event, marking the sudden and unexpected end of a life that had for decades captivated an immense audience. The world reacted with a collective gasp as the figure who had seemed larger than life was suddenly, irrevocably gone. The announcement of Elvis Presley's death on August 16, 1977, reverberated across the globe with an immediate and profound impact. For many, the news arrived as a sudden, almost unbelievable shock. Radio stations interrupted regular programming, television networks broke into broadcasts with special reports, and newspaper headlines quickly changed to proclaim the unexpected end of a cultural icon. The sheer speed of information dissemination in that era meant that within hours, the world was collectively processing the loss. An outpouring of grief followed, unprecedented in its scale for a non-political figure. Fans, many of whom had followed his career from its earliest days, reacted with deep sadness, a personal sense of bereavement that transcended mere admiration for a performer. People gathered spontaneously in public spaces sharing their shock and sorrow. Flowers and tributes began to appear at Graceland, transforming the private residence into an instant shrine. The media coverage was extensive and virtually universal. Journalists and reporters descended upon Memphis, capturing the raw emotion of the mourners and attempting to articulate the magnitude of the cultural moment. Editorials reflected on his legacy, while news segments recounted his life and career, often playing his most iconic songs. The world's attention was singularly focused on this event, underscoring the unique place Elvis Presley held in the global consciousness. For many, his music had been a soundtrack to their lives, spanning generations. His passing represented not just the loss of an entertainer, but for some, the end of an era, a symbolic closing of a chapter in popular culture. The grief was not confined to the United States. It was a phenomenon observed in countless countries, demonstrating the reach of his artistry and the universal appeal of his persona. The collective mourning underscored that Elvis Presley had been more than just a singer. He had become a fundamental part of the cultural fabric for millions across the planet. In the immediate wake of his passing, the legend of Elvis Presley began to coalesce with an unexpected swiftness. This sense of loss, profound as it was, quickly transitioned into a collective remembrance that elevated his status even further. His death, rather than diminishing his presence, seemed to imbue it with a new, almost mythical quality. The public's fascination with his life and career intensified, moving beyond mere celebrity interest into a deeper cultural study. Record sales, which had remained strong throughout his life, experienced an extraordinary surge in the months following his death. Albums and singles that had been staples in many households suddenly found new listeners, while existing fans revisited his extensive catalogue with a renewed sense of appreciation. His music, spanning rock and roll, gospel, blues, and country, demonstrated an enduring appeal that defied categorization and transcended temporal boundaries. The sheer volume of his recorded output ensured that there was always more to discover, sustaining interest for years to come. Beyond the music, a cottage industry dedicated to Elvis Presley's memory rapidly emerged. Books detailing his life, documentaries exploring his impact, and merchandise bearing his image proliferated. Graceland, his former home, transformed from a private estate into a public pilgrimage site, drawing countless visitors seeking a tangible connection to his world. This immediate commercial and cultural response solidified the notion that his influence was not merely a fleeting phenomenon but a lasting force. The narrative of his life, from humble beginnings to unprecedented global stardom, and finally to a tragic early end, became a powerful story that resonated deeply. It was a tale that embodied aspects of the American dream, artistic genius, and the isolating pressures of immense fame. The continued fascination with his personal struggles, his triumphs, and his unique artistry ensured that discussions about his life and impact remained vibrant and ongoing. His image, already iconic, became even more deeply etched into the collective consciousness, marking the true beginning of his perpetual legend. The property known as Graceland, which had served as Elvis Presley's private sanctuary for 2 decades, underwent a profound transformation in the years following his death. What was once a secluded residence became a focal point for millions, evolving into a major pilgrimage site for fans from across the globe. This shift was not immediate, but rather a gradual recognition of the immense public desire to connect with his memory in a tangible way. Initially, after his passing, the gates of Graceland became a gathering place for mourners. Fans travelled from distant locations, leaving flowers, cards, and personal tributes along the stone walls. This spontaneous outpouring of devotion signalled a deeper need for a dedicated space where his legacy could be honoured and experienced directly. In 1982, Graceland officially opened its doors to the public. This decision, driven by the need to manage the estate financially and to fulfill the public's yearning, marked a pivotal moment. The stately home, preserved much as Elvis had left it, offered a unique window into his private world. Visitors could walk through the jungle room, see the living room where he entertained guests, and stand before the meditation garden, where he and members of his family were laid to rest. The opening of Graceland quickly established it as one of the most visited private homes in the United States, second only to the White House. It drew an astonishing number of tourists annually. A testament to the enduring and widespread appeal of Elvis Presley. For many, a visit to Graceland was more than just a tour of a famous house. It was a deeply emotional journey, an opportunity to feel closer to the man whose music and charisma had touched their lives. This transformation of a personal residence into a global landmark underscored the profound and lasting impact Elvis Presley had on popular culture. Graceland became a living museum, a repository of memories, and a tangible symbol of his continuing presence in the world. It stood, and continues to stand, as a quiet monument to a life lived in the public eye, now eternally open for contemplation and remembrance. The musical legacy of Elvis Presley, often distilled to the title of the King, extends far beyond the immediate impact of his meteoric rise. His enduring sound, characterized by a unique vocal timbre and an audacious blending of genres, continues to resonate through the decades, influencing countless artists across the vast spectrum of popular music. At the core of this legacy was his voice itself, a rich, versatile instrument capable of conveying tenderness, raw power, and profound emotion. It possessed a natural vibrato and a remarkable range, allowing him to navigate the subtle nuances of a ballad with the same conviction he brought to the energetic demands of a rock and roll anthem. This vocal prowess, innate and largely untrained, became his most recognizable signature. Beyond the voice, it was his pioneering approach to genre that cemented his place in musical history. Elvis did not invent rock and roll, but he undeniably popularized it by synthesizing elements that had long existed in separate musical traditions. He seamlessly wove together the rhythmic drive of rhythm and blues, the heartfelt storytelling of country, and the spiritual depth of gospel music. This fusion created something new and compelling, breaking down the rigid stylistic boundaries of the era. His early Sun Records recordings, in particular, serve as prime examples of this groundbreaking synthesis, capturing a raw energy that redefined popular music. His extensive catalogue, spanning over 2 decades, showcases this diversity, from the rebellious spirit of Hound Dog and Jailhouse Rock to the poignant introspection of Can't Help Falling in Love and the spiritual uplift of his gospel albums. Elvis explored a wide emotional and stylistic landscape. This breadth ensured that his music held appeal for diverse audiences and continued to discover new listeners long after his passing. The influence of Elvis Presley is evident in the work of subsequent generations of musicians. Artists in rock, pop, country, and even soul music have cited him as an inspiration, drawing from his stage presence, his vocal delivery, or his fearless genre experimentation. His impact is not merely historical. It is a current that continues to flow through the contemporary musical landscape, a testament to the timeless quality of his artistry and the foundational role he played in shaping modern sound. Elvis Presley's transition from a human being to a cultural icon and a figure of myth began during his lifetime, but it solidified profoundly in the years following his death. His image, his music, and the narrative of his life became woven into the fabric of 20th century culture, extending far beyond the realm of entertainment. He is not merely remembered as a singer, he occupies a unique, almost archetypal space in the collective consciousness. The title of the King, initially a descriptive moniker, evolved into something more profound, signifying not just his dominance in music, but his regal presence in popular culture. This status is perpetuated through various channels: the continued sale of his records, the constant stream of documentaries and films, the enduring popularity of Elvis impersonators, and the steady flow of visitors to Graceland. His image, instantly recognizable, transcends linguistic and national boundaries. Around such a significant figure, myths and legends inevitably accumulate. Stories of his generosity, his private struggles, and even unsubstantiated sightings after his death have contributed to a rich tapestry of folklore. These narratives often blend fact with embellishment, creating a persona that is both human and larger than life. The idea of Elvis as an American dream realized, a poor boy from Tupelo who achieved unimaginable fame, resonates deeply. Conversely, the tragedy of his later years, marked by isolation and health struggles, adds a poignant dimension to his story, transforming him into a cautionary tale about the pressures of celebrity. These accumulated layers of myth serve to reinforce his iconic status. They create a narrative that is compelling and endlessly reinterpretable, allowing each generation to find new meaning in his story. Elvis Presley therefore exists not just as a historical figure, but as a dynamic cultural construct, continually reanimated and reinterpreted, ensuring his lasting presence as the king in the popular imagination. The journey of Elvis Presley, from his modest origins in Tupelo, Mississippi, to the pinnacle of global superstardom, represents a singular trajectory in the annals of the 20th century. Born into poverty in 1935, his early life was marked by the struggles common to many working-class families in the American South. Yet within this environment, the seeds of his future were sown, nurtured by the diverse sounds of gospel, country, and rhythm and blues that permeated his community. His emergence onto the national stage in the mid-1950s was nothing short of revolutionary. With a sound that defied easy categorization and a captivating stage presence, he shattered existing musical boundaries and ignited a cultural phenomenon. He was a catalyst, transforming popular music and youth culture, challenging established norms, and inadvertently paving the way for countless artists who followed. His impact was not merely musical, it was societal, influencing fashion, attitudes, and the very definition of cool. However, the immense pressures that accompanied such unprecedented fame were equally transformative. The constant demands of touring, recording, and maintaining a public persona took a profound toll. His personal life, once relatively private, became a subject of intense public scrutiny. The narrative of his later years, marked by health struggles and an increasing reliance on medication, serves as a poignant reminder of the often unseen costs of global celebrity. His passing in 1977, though untimely, cemented his legend, transforming his earthly existence into an enduring myth. Elvis Presley's life was one of constant transformation, both for himself and for the world he inhabited. He was a product of his time, yet he transcended it, leaving an indelible mark on music, culture, and the broader tapestry of human experience. His voice, his image, and his story continue to resonate, a testament to a life that, despite its complexities and eventual tragedies, remains profoundly influential. The quiet boy from Tupelo became the king, and his reign, in the hearts and minds of millions, continues unbroken.